Okay, I'm a veteran now of 2 weekends of having the SD110, and as I've already mentioned, the learning curve's a little steeper than I thought it might be. So I started yesterday making a sign, but this one says here for ground floor, and it was working basically pretty well, as you can see. It started carving at this end and worked that way because the XY was over here in this corner. But it took 2 hours to carve this, and at this point, I don't know what I don't know.
I'm experimenting to find out what works, and in the process, I'm also discovering what doesn't. I'm in the Vectric software to create a new file. This program remembers the last file you created and starts with those same values. This was a great time saver for me as I was making a series of signs that were all the same size but had different lettering on each one. The signs were 3¼ by 12, and since I entered the dimensions in that order, the project showed up as you see it on the screen. As I was writing the script, I realized that if I entered the dimensions as 12 by 3¼ the workspace would have shown as horizontal rather than vertical, and I just would have mounted the board differently on the machine bed. So the learning process continues. The wood thickness was about 5/8, but that dimension isn't critical because I won't be cutting all the way through the wood. I'm only going to be carving slightly below the surface. I didn't notice until I was looking at the video to add the voiceover that the job was showing as double-sided. That's not the case, but it won't make any difference. I clicked on the text command because I'm making a sign for my store. It will be part of the store and office directory just inside the front door. I named the business Bob's Home Woodshop because my workshop is in my home, and I started out by selling at craft shows, then online. The woodshop is still in my home. I've just expanded to selling from a retail store as well as online. As I typed in what I wanted to carve on the sign, it showed up on the screen horizontally, but the workpiece is oriented vertically. I left the text size as 0.6 because that will work well with the final sign size. To move the text to where I wanted it, I moved to the Transform Object section of the screen and clicked on the Rotate Object icon. As I was learning this program, and before I understood it, when I saw the little markers appear, I grabbed the one in the lower right corner and used that to rotate the text. However, getting it to line up properly proved to be somewhere between difficult and impossible. Then I realized that the object rotated around the little target in the center, and there was a box called Type of Rotation. If you type in -90 and click Apply, the object selected moves 90 degrees around that pivot point. There is now a square in the middle of the text, and if I grab it with my mouse, I can drag the whole thing over to the left and middle of the workpiece. I centered the text when I moved it, but if you need to center an item, there are icons you can click for that. The text is already selected, so now I can move on to the next step to tell the machine what I want to do with this text. I move to the Toolpath section to set that up. The Pocket Toolpath is used to set up operations that will be inside the perimeter and generally only partway into the workpiece. Once again, the software remembers my last setting. The start depth is 0, the surface of the workpiece, and I found through experimentation that a cut depth of 0.06 inches gave me a good look. The tool will stay the same as well, 1/4 inch 60-degree V-bit. If I wanted to change that to another bit, I would click Remove and then choose the bit I wanted to use instead. I give a name to the file, then click Calculate. This will show you what the tool is going to do. I clicked the Preview Toolpath button and ran this a little slower to be able to see what was going to happen. The tool is going to take the most efficient path, which in this case means starting with the letter P, the last letter in the sign. This is because I'm setting the XY0 position at the lower left edge of the workpiece. It's good to preview the toolpath to make sure it does what you want and expect it to do. I heard someone say of CNC machines, the good news is they do exactly what you tell them to do. The bad news is they do exactly what you tell them to do. This tip gives you an opportunity to preview what the machine is going to do. I was okay with that, so I saved the file to the hard drive. Since I have already worked with this software, it knows I'm going to be using the Next Wave SD100 machine. Everything I programmed is converted to a .dap file, the language the machine understands. This is different for various machines, so it's a very important step. Now I need to switch to the Ready to Control software that comes with the next lathe machine. I loaded the file, and on the screen, I can see what the machine is going to do. Starting at the XYZ 0 point, the gantry will move to the letter P and then lower the router to start engraving. The router will cover the letters from bottom to top, backwards from how we would do this by hand. When it finishes covering the B at the top of the sign, the router will be lifted up about an inch above the surface, and the gantry will move back to the starting XY position. At this point, I sometimes run an air cut with the spindle turned off, just to see what will happen with the machine actually moving. This is an opportunity to make sure the workpiece is mounted in the correct position, and there are no clamps in the way or anything else unexpected. The machine is going to do exactly what you told it to do, even if you told it to do something stupid. But I had just run another sign, and the only thing that changed was the words on the sign, so I didn't need to run an air cut. I put on my hearing protection, started the router motor, then hit the right arrow to start running the program. I'll watch it closely for a short time, then go about another project within a short distance so I can stop the machine if something goes wrong. I used a square to set the wood at a 90-degree angle to the y-axis so the engraving would line up with the edges of the workpiece. I already had a strip of double-sided tape on the bottom of the board, and it had worked on some trials but not on others, so I decided to add a couple of screws into the spoil board as well. There are times when I can be a belt and suspenders kind of guy, and since I'm in the early stages of CNC learning, this seemed like a good time for caution. I placed the screws in spots that I knew the router would come nowhere near. With the workpiece securely mounted, I moved to my laptop to set up the Ready to Control software that comes with the machine. By the way, this laptop is older than dirt, but it still works fine. I purchased it when I was studying for my doctorate, and it has a Windows 8 for the operating system. I used the laptop's controls to move the gantry to the XY0 position, and then I reached over to turn on the router. I stuck my head in a little closer to make sure it started carving where I thought it should, and then I moved the camera in for a better look as well. The router is equipped with a 60-degree V-bit, and it does just what it is programmed to do, carving out letters a little bit at a time. This machine only produces very fine sawdust, and it's not even kicked up into the air like some tools. I watched the machine for a few minutes to ensure everything was going as planned. Then I moved to another area of the workshop to do something else. The battery-operated router is much quieter than a 115-volt router, but it's still noisy, and hearing protection is required. I kept mine on while working at the scroll saw. If you are experienced on the SD100, or another machine for that matter, you may have realized the error I made on the ground floor sign. I committed the same error when I set up the Bob's Home Woodshop sign. I attached the left side of the workpiece to the far side of the spoil board, and that is beyond the reach of the machine's x-axis. I now realize that the reach is from the front of the machine back about 12 inches, not all the way to the back of the base. Okay, I admit maybe that was a dumb mistake, but maybe someone who watched this video will avoid making that mistake when they get their own CNC machine. Please give me a like if you found this video helpful. Even better, leave a comment and let me know if you are interested in more CNC content.